My name is C.K. Hoffler, and I've got the honor and pleasure of being the president of the National Bar during a historic time in history. Our young lawyers at the National Bar Association have thrived and have really been off the charts under the leadership of Anika Williams, who's the chair of the YLD, the Young Lawyers section of the National Bar Association, talking to my chief of staff, the amazing, extraordinary Akua Kapak, that I said, how can we honor these extraordinary men and women of the National Bar, who, by the way, are the future of our organization? And so we came up with this thought, this notion, along with so many others, of the young lawyers on the go. When I see Anika Williams, when I see Janeen Lofton, I will say those two women in particular, but I know Titus and Charlie, you all are the same as well. The passion, the energy, the creativity, the innovation, the ready to act. You know, when I've called them to do anything, they're like, they don't even let me finish a sentence before they move into action and mobilize teams of people to help. You see, ladies and gentlemen, there's no better compliment to our organization than when our young, innovative, extraordinary members say that there's added value to the point where they've transitioned and gone to a place they wanted to go to, in large part because of the exposure, experience, and profile that they've gained through the MBA.
My name is Titus Nichols. I'm an attorney here in Atlanta, Georgia. My practice with the Atlanta Personal Injury Law Group, we're focused primarily on representing people injured. So you might think, well, what the heck's I got to do with data privacy? But really, data privacy itself is so expansive that it really touches on just about every field of law, whether it's personal injury, dealing with HIPAA and having to deal with proper release of medical information, criminal law when you're dealing with government investigations. I also serve in the Georgia Army National Guard as a JAG officer, so I have to advise soldiers and commanders in regards to data privacy, government investigations, inspector general investigations, FOIAs, open records, all those types of things, and also with the military and what they do with cybersecurity missions as well. So it's pretty expansive. I really got involved in data privacy, cybersecurity. Back in 2017, I was involved in representing Reality Winner. She was the NSA contractor who was prosecuted for disclosing top secret information to a American media source. And so with that involved a lot of just data privacy, computer information, everything else. So that's what really piqued my interest. And then from there, I learned about just how wide-reaching data privacy is. And so from there, I focused on getting my CIPP certification, Certified Information Privacy Professional. And then just from there, just trying to get as much experience dealing with data privacy and really just recognizing that some of the stuff I already dealt with data privacy and just trying to learn the left and right limits of it.
Titus, what you mentioned, the fact that data privacy issues can affect you.
At least from my perspective, the data privacy kind of is like the David versus Goliath, at least the way I see it, in the sense that from the plaintiff's perspective, we want a more protective law when it comes to data privacy because we recognize that data breaches happen all the time. It's not a question of if your emails are going to be disclosed, but just when and in what situation, or whether it's going to be something embarrassing, or your private information from you going on to Best Buy or whatever major corporation. And so right now, the way, if you really wanted to compare America's data privacy laws to other countries, we have a very patchwork system. We don't have an all-encompassing law. It's very based upon different sectors: medical, technology, financial, military. Everyone has their own sector. And so if I'm Joe Blow, regular consumer, and my data is breached or my information is disclosed, I really don't have much legal recourse because my particular state might not have codified laws. Like here in Georgia, if there's a major breach, I can't sue Target or sue Delta or whomever by saying, oh, well, you disclosed my HIPAA violation, because there is no private right of action. So why does that matter? Well, if you look at it from a political sense, that's really what one of the big holdups in Congress is. The Democrats want to pass more data privacy laws that give individuals the private right to sue. Businesses don't want that. Businesses are saying, hey, the attorneys general can take care of that. Joe Blow doesn't need the right to come sue me. And and you can see from their perspective when you look at states like Illinois. Illinois has what's called the BIPA. And again, we're going back into acronyms. the Biometric Information Protection Act, which people have used to sue Facebook. And there was one settlement for $500 million. And because of that, corporations are keeping that in mind because they don't want to see settlements or verdicts like that. So at this stage, it really is just depending on what state you're in, you might not have any recourse if your information is just put out there.
That's good information. Charlie, to the extent that Titus brought up some good points. We talked about HIPAA, obviously that's related to healthcare, or you mentioned like financial, that would be like the Billy Graham Leach Act. How does an individual who sees in it some sort of injustice kind of get involved?
I just want to point out Titus is absolutely right. I like how you put that. If I could simplify it even more, it's you got to look at your data. Depending on the type of data that you're dealing with, there's probably regulations. We've heard about HIPAA. If you've gone anywhere to a doctor, all of those forms and the right to disclose and the consents that you're signing, that's the reason they do that is because they want to comply with HIPAA, which I think is the help me out here, Titus. We there's a reason why we come with acronyms like Health Information Protection Act or something.
And what's so funny about HIPAA is that it's HIPAA. A lot of people put HIPPA, but if you point that out, then you just the nitpicking a-hole who's like, it must be like, what does it matter? All I care about is this person gonna put my medical information out there on the streets? But yeah, you're right, HIPAA, HIPAA.
Yeah, it's so if you're in that space, that's gonna govern, and there's a reason why we use the acronyms. If you're in the criminal justice space, and Titus, I'm sure you've seen this. Depending on the criminal records, it might be governed by the FBI Criminal Justice Information Security Law or policy, which is CJIS, FBI CJIS. You move into education space, and it's a lot of the regulations, and this goes to what Titus was saying. You got this, there's no individual private right per se. It's mainly a government function where you have the attorney general, so they can't disclose your grades or any records that you've had in college or school without your consent. They can't just disclose that information. These are, let's see, HIPAA, CJIS, FERPA, IRS 1075. So everybody has tax information that's governed by IRS 1075, or the other acronym FTI, which governs federal tax information. These are just examples from the corporation perspective. As Titus said, we don't want to go into business. We want to build scalable services. And if individuals, we have to fight with every individual separately, that's going to cause us headache. And that deters from the motivation to go into business, because that's eating into your profits. GDPR, which is different, as Titus said, is I can go after Facebook by myself, little old me. And we've seen this. There's a case out there called Shrims, where it was, I forget where he was from. I think he's an Australian kid, came to school in Florida somewhere, was on Facebook, asked for some Facebook records. Facebook didn't comply or give him what he wanted, and he went overseas and sued, and kind of caused this big fuss, and is causing a big headache for any corporate lawyer that deals with data privacy and security, because now third-party vendors have to go through this certification and certify that they take certain steps in data protection and data security and have all of these compliance. So what can a little man do? You can be like Shrims, but maybe not here in America.
Let's talk about cybersecurity.
From a military perspective, cybersecurity it's a field of battle. But the problem is, you just can't go bomb Russia because you have evidence that they did something. Because at the end of the day, if Russia blows up a building, okay, no question, you can retaliate. That's clearly in the Geneva Convention, you can respond. But what about if Russia has a private sector group go hack something? Like they go hack Bank of America, or they hack the electrical grid that causes problems. Well, America can't just go bomb Russia. So now you have, and what you're seeing is that the countries are acting through different proxies to carry out different cyber attacks, such as you had a situation where Russia did something in the country of Belarus and it cost $10 billion. Well, NATO's not going to respond to that because it's a cyber attack. And so you have different countries, different actors saying we can get away with more stuff through cyber activities than spending money bombing something or invading or something else. So from a global perspective, cyber attacks are becoming much more common because how can you, first of all, you have to prove a country responsible. A country can always play dumb and say, that wasn't us. That was just some independent hacker group. We don't know anything about it. When in reality, the country is providing the resources for that group to do that. From a consumer level, we're seeing how something as a cyber attack can disrupt our daily lives. Like here in Georgia, people lost their mind and was just racing to the gas station to fill up. And it's like, the more of y'all that rush to the gas station, that's why there's going to be a gas shortage. Well, you can't inject reason and common sense when people are freaking out because the news is saying, oh, there might be a shortage of gas. And so it's just, you just hope that the next cyber thing doesn't make the bank system go offline, because then you really gonna see people act crazy.
Are there any tips or pieces of advice you can give from a private practice or even from a corporate practice perspective with regards to protecting your clients or yourself?
My very blunt advice is don't, and this is kind of coming from the corporate perspective, don't mess around with Rudy Poos with your important data. If you got very important data, again, you wouldn't just hand your phone over to a child with all of your private videos and your photos. Although I know sometimes we do this. If you had some really confidential stuff, you wouldn't just hand that over and allow the password to be 00000. As an enterprise, when you're trying to advise your clients, it's the same way. You want to do your due diligence on the company that you may be handing your data over to.
Okay.
I mean, like Charlie said, is just assume that everything you have is going to be in the cloud. Like Google Drive will go through your accounts and delete certain videos or whatever that they feel violates the terms of their service. And so you have to accept the fact that the cloud is not totally private. Either A, someone's going to get access to the cloud, or B, the service provider is going to have access, or the service provider is going to be hacked and all the information is going to be distributed. So really, if you really want to be private, don't put it in, don't digitize it. Once it goes digital, you really can't control where it's going to be because like Charlie said, you wouldn't hand your phone over. Well, you put something in your phone. Our phones are so connected to the cloud now that information is uploaded all the time. Even if you go through and set the individual settings and not upload, at some point, you're going to transmit information to whatever service, whether it's Verizon or Panera Bread or whatever. So you just have to treat it as if, like I said, what is very sensitive and you don't want it shared, don't turn into digital.
Again, as Titus kind of alluded to this point, it's very profitable cybersecurity now. So Titus, we got to get together because I'm in Atlanta as well. For anybody that listens to any type of rap song, you know Atlanta is like known as the home of the scammers. It's an unfortunate thing, but it's a hustle. It's just like the stereotype of somewhere in Nigeria, there's somebody calling you about your IRS stuff and asking for your social security number. So you just have to be smart and aware of kind of the phishing schemes to avoid this. But just understand it's going to stay. It's around because the laws haven't caught up yet with technology. And right now, as Titus pointed out in Russia, it's more profitable to wage cyber warfare on someone. You probably heard of ransomware. This was happening a couple of years ago, but I see it in my space supporting state and local governments that states are getting their data, their systems locked up, and they're being forced by, they call it ransomware, because you're not going to get access to your data unless you pay me. That could be some guy sitting in his mom's basement in Iowa who's about to get $1 million cash out. That's just more profitable than going out and working every day.
And a lot of these scammers are requiring a payment to be in crypto.
And that's why ransomware attacks are so profitable for these people. Now, you could always have the hard-headed CEO who's like, I don't care, we don't pay ransoms. That's not what we're going to do. Well, then all of that data is lost, and you're going to have to find something else to do, and you have to kind of build from the ground up. That is not economically feasible for most companies, and that's why this space is not going anywhere, because the laws haven't caught up with it enough to kind of say, okay, this is what you need to do. And I think, Titus, you mentioned this earlier, they're still going back and forth in Congress right now about the small stuff and can't come together and get a big stuff. So what you see is states have to step up. And again, when we say this issue has impacted the world, even with the COVID-19 response, because I've seen this in helping us, Microsoft develops track and trace apps and vaccine registration administrations solutions that they give to these state and local government entities, so you can schedule on your phone or online to go in and get a vaccine. States have had to take this into their own hand because there's no overarching leadership at the White House that said everybody has to do this. So when he mentioned it's a patchwork system, it's definitely a patchwork system. And while that's a problem, as a young attorney, if I was on this panel, I would hear opportunity. That means there's going to be opportunity there.
It's definitely opportunity, because there's so many businesses that they don't know what they don't know. They don't know that they're dealing with HIPAA information, that by gathering someone's name, address, or whatever, that's identifiable information. And so they have to protect it in a certain way. That business doesn't know, because the business is thinking, well, I'm just a barbecue joint. I don't need to know all this HIPAA and data privacy stuff. Well, you do, because you are compiling people's information. And if there's a breach, that's going to lead to government investigations. Granted, at this point, can't nobody sue, but that's changing. In Georgia, there was a case against an Athens medical facility. I think it was orthopedics, where they were hacked by some Russian cyber group, and they told the patients, "Hey, we don't have any cyber insurance. Y'all need to go check your credit reports, all that type of stuff." Well, the patients came together and tried to sue the facility. At first, Georgia court's like, "Oh, well, you don't have any real harm. Y'all just are complaining because of the threat that someone might take your information." Well, the Georgia Supreme Court came back and said, "Well, you know what? That's good enough to be a legal harm." Now, it's still undecided whether or not they're going to receive class certification and whether the case can go forward, but it's still showing that the law is progressing so that businesses are going to be on the hook if they're reckless in dealing with people's private information. Right now, like, prime example, there is, if you're dealing with apps that deal with children education, there's the COPA, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. Right now, there's no real criminal aspect to it, but you can get fined by the government. There are companies that have been fined 6 figures by the federal government because they did not take the appropriate steps to protect children's private information. Now, when they made the app, they probably weren't thinking, "Oh, this is going to hurt a child." But then when they got hit with that suit from the Office of Civil Rights saying, "Well, you are not in compliance, you have violated this, and they got that 6-figure bill thrown at them, they realized real quickly how they have to take cybersecurity very serious. So, like Charlie said, as a young lawyer, to get into the field, the best way to do it now is just to learn the different sectors, so that if you're in the financial sector, you're in education, or you're in whatever, you can provide that advice to somebody and say, "Hey, business owner, you really need to do X, Y, and Z, because here's how much it's going to cost you."
Great points, Titus. Great points, Charlie. I think that, Titus, would be helpful for you to kind of elaborate on the fact as to whether or not your CIPP in the United States helps. So, Charlie, why don't you kick that off and let us know whether or not you found it to be helpful, or whether or not that was just additional.
When I took it, there was U.S. and then you could get European law as well. So there's 2 different types of certifications. But the good thing about this, and we'll put the acronyms and spell it out, maybe put a website in the chat box, is it's a generalist foundation. So you learn about all of the key data privacy and security regulations from finance to criminal justice, tax, HIPAA, against all of them. And what I found is I learned and had a good foundation in each of them before I actually encountered them. But eventually, most of this data gets intertwined. If you got financial services data, eventually you're making money. IRS 1075 may come in there as well. And when you got people making a whole bunch of money, typically somebody's going to do something wrong. And then you got criminal justice information that gets mixed in there. So all of this data, again, as Titus said, is patchwork. But what it teaches you is, okay, here's some of the things to consider when you're trying to set up a data privacy and security program. And because now you have this broad view of, okay, depending on the data, there may be things that I need to consider about this. And it's typically, what is the end user or the person who actually owns the data that gave it to you? How much value do they place in the privacy of this? Certain things we give away for free, like what we put on Facebook. But in polite society, who you voted for, how much money you make, your religious background or your ethnicity. For some people, that's hands off, and that is very critical. There's another acronym called PII, personally identifiable information. And to some extent, depending on the context, people really don't play with that stuff. Like, I don't want you to know where my child's address is. Like, if it's attached to me, that's different. But if you can find that information as it's attached to my child, as a parent, you're going to think that's kind of a problem. So that's how the certification helped me out. It gave me a very broad view before I even encountered all of these areas.
From the personal injury perspective, my CIPP really doesn't really change anything when dealing with my typical cases. But like Charlie said, it is a foundational understanding of data privacy. Because America's data privacy laws are so mixed and intertwined in such a patchwork, it's not as if you can just go to school, get a degree, and be like, oh, I know data privacy. Like, a lot of data privacy are brand new laws that are coming out, and then old laws from the 70s, like FERPA, the Federal Information, I forgot the rest of the acronym, but that's a law from the 70s. The Privacy Act is from the 70s. And so you're trying to learn, where does it begin and where does it end? But with CIPP, it does a good job of giving you an overview of the different sectors so that when you encounter something, you'll be just familiar enough to say, you know what? That's Child Online Privacy Protection Act, or that's dealing with FTC, or that's dealing with the FTA, or whatever. And so you'll understand, like Charlie said, okay, this is something that's very important. This is something that's very valuable. Here are the consequences, or here's what you need to look at. Here's the law or the statute you need to look at to understand, how is this information to be protected? When are you supposed to get information? What information you can ask for? How long you're supposed to have it? Like with HIPAA, there is the security rule that says how long you're supposed to hold information, when and how you're supposed to destroy it. And if you don't do that, you could be on the hook. Or there's also what's called BAA, business associate agreements, where you also have to make sure that your vendors are in compliance with data privacy laws, because you might be able to say, well, that's not my company. That's the shredding company. They didn't do X, Y, and Z. Well, you're on the hook because certain data privacy laws require you to keep tabs on your vendors to make sure they're in compliance. So I sound like to say that CIPP is just, if you want to have a conversation with someone about data privacy, having a CIPP gives you that foundation so you know where it begins and ends, and you know how to go find more information.
As Titus pointed out, many of these companies are just waking up and realizing, oh, I need to comply with some stuff. We have been collecting data for years. What should we do with that? That's part of kind of my role. You can use data in two ways. One, you could use it to make your internal business more efficient. And then the other one is you can go out and monetize that data, because essentially somebody would pay for that data and that information. And we see this in a much bigger space with the internet.
The IAPP, International Association of Privacy Professionals, CIPP.org is a wonderful website to go to get more information. And that's really where you want to start if you want to learn more about the CIPP. But I would definitely say anybody who takes it, study it, treat it just like you did the bar exam. Get the book, read it front to back, make notes. Like I really was like I was back in law school, my highlighters and everything. Because when you take the exam, it's all multiple choice. But the way they ask the questions, it's just
You gotta know your stuff.
exactly. You can't just be like, "Oh, I'm a lawyer. I know this stuff." It's different. You got to study it like it's the bar exam.
What are some like parting things that we can kind of like interject as we wrap up? You know, becoming like cyber attorneys or being in the space of like technology, a law, or maybe even going in house and being in that space.
Recognize that your information is valuable. There are businesses who will pay for your information, like lawyers. Lawyers want your name and email address. Why? So they can send you emails from their firm advertising. Something as simple as your contact information is worth money to somebody. Prime example, Amazon. You can be a seller on Amazon, have all the different customers in the world, but you don't have access to that email list. Amazon controls the email list and you have to communicate through Amazon. Why? Because Amazon recognizes that having that information is powerful. If we have the client list, we have access to the clients. So recognize that your PII is valuable to a company. It's going to be commoditized. And so you have to be very mindful of when you give it away and in what situations you're giving away your private information because someone's trying to make money off it.